PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. The live rating list makes very interesting reading at the moment. So I'm recording this on Monday the 6th of May. And the top placings are like this. Carlsen, Caruana, Nakamura, Nepomniachtchi in the top 4 places. And then in places 5, 6 and 7 we have Abdusattorov number 5, Gukesh number 6 and Erigaisi number 7. If we look at those ratings, Abdusattorov 2765, Gukesh 2763 and Erigaisi 2762. It is so tight between those players. And yeah, Gukesh is the man of the moment, the superstar who's won the candidates, but Erigaisi and Abdusattorov have been on tremendous form recently, and they're going up all the time. They've recently been playing in the Sigeman tournament in Malmö. They shared first, actually. Abdusattorov won it on tiebreak. And I'd like to show you one of Abdusattorov's games. This is modern chess. It is absolutely fascinating. It is so complex. The opening somehow isn't that important. Players at the top level these days appreciate they're not likely to win very quickly in the opening. It's all about getting an interesting position. So let's see. Nodirbek Abdusattorov playing white. And his opponent is Nils Grandelius, who's rated about 100 points lower, 2664, but, well, we know that he's a very strong grandmaster. So here's what I mean about playing, a pragmatic opening. G3. This certainly does not guarantee white an advantage, but it keeps the tension in the position. So white is playing a kind of King's Indian setup, and black is playing very classically. There is a line of the Vienna that's like this, where obviously in the Vienna the knight is on c3, but this gives white a few more options because you can go c3 sometimes. But in this case, Abdusattorov simply transposed back to a kind of Vienna. So he might want to play knight a4 to claim that bishop, and therefore black played a5. So the bishop can always drop back. h3, so it's a very calm start from white. h6. I think that means that black is able to play bishop e6 without allowing knight g5. And then king h2. So this is a very slow build-up from Abdusattorov. Well, seemingly, it means that if this knight ever moves, then the f-pawn might fly up the board. And this is what happens now is really unusual. I mean, it's very hard to imagine that white is somehow going to get the advantage from this position. I mean, why should white be better here? What's he playing for? But let's see what Abdusattorov does. He manages to somehow stir things up. So, of course, he would like to take that bishop, and the bishop drops back. So what on earth is this knight doing at the side of the board? Well, it was all about releasing the c-pawn. So now Abdusattorov has a clamp in the centre, so black is not going to be able to get in d5. Then again, it's created a hole on d4. But if black goes in with the knight, watch what happens. Well, first of all, we'll put that knight back. But then because the king is on h2, you're ready to play f4. And that's quite a dangerous attacking move. So knight d7 from Grandelius. The knight's doing nothing here. I mean, this has been quite time consuming, putting the pawn on c4. And Grandelius is the first to make a pawn break. I have to say, at this moment, seems to me that black is doing absolutely fine. He's managed to open things up and has an extra pawn in the centre, basically. But it's not so clear. And after this, well, of course, it's not bad for white at all. It reminds me of some close Sicilian positions, actually, with colours reversed. Grandelius exchanges. You know, I can understand why he did that, because it slightly weakens white's king, actually. Now that bishop is potentially vulnerable, so it just steps back. And that looks very, very sensible. Very good move. So what is white doing with these pawns? They look a little bit sensitive. You know, black structure, I think, looks stronger to me. Abdusattorov steps forward with the pawn. I mean, this certainly doesn't solve white's problems in the middle. But of course it's ambitious, and white might gain space with d5. Knight b4 played, so now it's becoming incredibly complex because there are potentially threats to come in. Whoops, that was misfired. Threats to come in here, supported by the bishop. Queen d2. I mean, black has such a range of potential moves here. You know, knight f6 is possible. Perhaps looking to bring the knight in here. e4 and then knight f6. You never know, that knight might be able to step in on d3. You could also simply take here and then maybe go knight f6. Because that square, I mean, all these squares on the e-file look a bit weak to me. But Grandelius played bishop d3, attacking the rook. Also attacking the c-pawn, therefore the rook has to swing over. And it looks a little bit offside. I think if I were white, I'd rather have the rook on the f-file, but, well, needs must. So now Grandelius exchanged and put the bishop back on e4. Okay, this looks like a very logical continuation to me. You know, that's a nice square. And now the knight is attacked. Knight h4. So this is attacked, and knight f6 protects. And yeah, that could be a useful square. And you can see that, well, maybe white's king's a little bit vulnerable. d5. Well, I think once this pawn has gone forward, it better keep going forward. And this introduces the idea to spin the knight round to e6. So that is extremely dangerous. Yeah, watch out for that one. So time is of the essence here. So yeah, black better react quickly. Otherwise knight d4 to e6 looks very good. I mean, I mentioned that white's king is potentially vulnerable. Well, it is. You've got to watch out for tactics along the second rank. But at least the queen is there. And this knight also has potential to come in. c6. Okay. Grandelius is trying to stir things up. And queen b6. So he's looking to take the initiative as well. I have to say, I find this a really frightening position for both sides. I'm not sure I would relish playing black or white here, because, you know, these knights have potential. White's king looks a little bit insecure. Black's pieces are somehow quite active. I mean, you know, it's very hard to talk in generalities here. So for the lazy commentator like me, it's a tough one because it's all about specifics. You've got to calculate correctly. So, for example, knight e6. Well, of course, it's a fantastic move. We all love our octopus knight. There we go. I'll have a slurp of tea. But in this case, it's just a horrible blunder. Knight g4 check. And rook f2 wins the queen. So, knight f5. Yeah, blocks the f-file. And, I mean, this is such a sharp position now. So, you know, this pawn is attacked. I mean, you have to watch out for this one. There's potential to get in on the king. There's a lot going on here. Grandelius took on d5. I mean, incredibly, the dreaded machine thinks that g6 is the best move in this position. But this is such an inhuman move. I would very quickly persuade myself that this is really not a good idea. I mean, white has... I mean, obviously if the knight retreats or takes here, then that's a problem. The knight is hanging. So this is a very forcing move. But there are two decent tries. I mean, one is knight takes h6 check, and then knight e6. If king takes, then rook f1, with the idea queen d2. I mean, this black queen is miles from the action. But actually queen e3, you just leave this one dangling, and I mean, this is incredibly messy. And there's also knight e7 check, which forces this one. And then, okay, we can block the queen out, and then rook f1. I mean, this would be absolutely terrifying. To calculate this correctly would be impossible. But, okay, let me just give you one line. In fact, the game should end in a draw like this. Takes, and now not king takes f6. That's winning for white. King gets caught. But king takes knight, and then queen e4 check, and that burns out to a draw by perpetual. I mean, this is incredible stuff. But there's no way that one is going to play g6 here, unless you had about 8 hours to analyse this position. Grandelius plays what looks like a sensible move. He takes on d5. But after this, actually, the initiative swings over to white. Those knights are really powerful. And watch what happens now. Knight takes g7. Because if rook takes... No, we don't take the rook. But you take here with check and rook takes f6. That's got to be winning for white because the king is so exposed. And d takes c4. Okay, time for you to have a think. Time for me to have another drink. Cheers. Yes, very appropriately I've got my Octopus Knight mug with these two octopuses thrashing around near black's king. White play. Knight h5 is really strong. If that's taken, then knight takes h6, forking king and rook. So king h7. And another crazy move here. Knight e7. That's absolutely extraordinary. So just looking to open things up here, basically, and once white breaks through with these pieces, then that should be curtains for the king. For example, if, well, knight here, knight f6, and then actually knight d5 is an awkward move. Those knights are just causing havoc. So queen d4 protects that one. Well, you know, Grandelius trying to centralise, trying to bring the queen closer to the king side. But knight d5 is fantastically strong. I mean, this is just wonderful. So threats here, and obviously there's a pin. But now black has to take. And rook f1. Well, white is an exchange ahead. All the pieces are in play, practically. Queen needs to come into play. King exposed. I mean, this must be winning for white. But let's see how Abdusattorov finished things off, because it was very, very nice. So he played rook f4 here. Very sensible. You could also win with knight f6. Let me just show this one to you. That's a really nice variation. So mate threatened on h7. So check. You can still go wrong here. Queen g2 actually loses. So king g1. Queen c2 covers h7. And now you don't even have to take the queen. You can play here, threatening queen f6. Queen goes back. Then exchange queens. And there's no decent defense to this. You can still play knight f3 and knight g5, but then h4. And that will finish things off. Push the knight out, rook h7, checkmate. So there's lots of lovely tactics here. So, sorry, coming back to this position. Yes, knight f6 is winning. Abdusattorov actually played rook f4, also incredibly strong. Okay, what was his idea? I mean, I guess, can you go back to... I guess you could still play knight f6 here. I mean, it's not quite as good as the last time, but anyway. Queen f2 is a good move here. Just threatening to get this in. But Abdusattorov finished off in a very flash way here. He played rook h7. So if queen takes, then the queen swoops down, and, well, that's mate follows shortly. And in the game, king takes h7, queen b7, king gets chased up the board, and then rook h4 mate. What a gentleman. Nils Grandelius allowed himself to be checkmated. Well, what a game. As I said at the start, this is kind of modern chess. You know, Abdusattorov not going for a quick kill, not playing very ambitiously, but he gets a very interesting position, and he's strong enough to be able to find something that just kind of complicates things. And once d4 comes in, well, I mean, basically all bets are off. It's just very, very double-edged. But his command of the tactics, when it came to around about this position, were absolutely superb. Those knights did a brilliant job. So there we go. Gukesh, whatever happens in the World Championship match later on in the year, he has serious rivals in the chess world at the moment. Abdusattorov, Erigaisi, I mean, there are others coming up as well. It's an exciting time in the chess world.